It was supposed to be just another routine night, another quiet shift patrolling the dense forests of the national park. I had done this 100 times before. Every inch of these woods was practically burned into my memory. The towering pines swayed gently in the cool breeze, and the moonlight filtered through the branches, casting long, spindly shadows across the forest floor. It had been uneventful for the most part, until it wasn't. I still remember the uneasy feeling that had settled in the pit of my stomach that night. I couldn't explain it at first. It was the kind of gnawing sensation you get when you know something is off, but you can't quite put your finger on it. The woods were quiet. Too quiet. Usually, you'd hear the rustling of animals, the occasional hoot of an owl, maybe even the distant howl of a coyote. But that night, the only sound was the soft crunch of my boots on the dirt path, and it felt wrong, like the entire forest was holding its breath. My name is John, and I've been a park ranger for over 10 years. I've heard plenty of strange stories over the years, legends of creatures that roamed the forests long before humans set foot here, whispers of shadowy figures seen only in the corner of your eye, and unexplained noises that echoed through the trees at night. But none of that had ever truly fazed me. I was a rational man. I believed in things I could see, things I could explain. But what happened that night, there's no explanation for it. As I made my way deeper into the woods, I radioed in to let the station know my location. All clear, I said into the receiver, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I quickened my pace, eager to get through my rounds and head back to the safety of the station. That's when I heard it, a soft, distant cry, like someone calling for help. It was faint, almost swallowed by the trees, but unmistakable. My heart skipped a beat. No one was supposed to be out here this late, and the park had been closed for hours. I stopped in my tracks, listening. There it was again. Help, please. I swallowed hard, my hand instinctively going to the flashlight on my belt. It was coming from deeper in the woods, off the beaten path. I knew I should report it, call it in before heading off alone, but something compelled me forward. Maybe it was the voice. It sounded desperate, fragile, like someone who was truly in danger. Hello? I called out, my voice echoing through the trees. This is Ranger John. Are you okay? Do you need help? No answer. Just silence. I stepped off the path, pushing through the underbrush as the trees grew thicker around me. The beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the twisting branches and gnarled roots beneath my feet. I could still hear the voice, but it was getting fainter, as if it were moving further away, leading me deeper into the woods. Wait! I called out, now breaking into a jog. I'm coming. As I pushed forward, I began to notice something strange. The air around me had grown colder, unnaturally cold for a summer night. My breath misted in the air before me, and the trees seemed different somehow, larger, more twisted, like they had grown unnaturally in the short time I had ventured off the path. And that feeling, that deep-rooted sense of dread, was growing stronger with every step. Suddenly, I caught movement out of the corner of my eye, a flash of white darting between the trees. I stopped, swinging my flashlight toward the direction of the movement. There, just at the edge of the light, I saw it. At first, I thought it was a deer. It was tall, unnaturally tall, with long, gangly limbs and a hunched posture. Its skin was pale, almost translucent in the moonlight, and its eyes. God, those eyes. They glowed a sickly yellow, staring at me with an intensity that made my blood run cold. "Jesus," I whispered, stepping back instinctively. The thing cocked its head, like it was studying me, sizing me up. For a brief moment, neither of us moved. Then, without warning, it let out this horrible, guttural screech and bolted toward me. "Run," my brain screamed, but my legs refused to move, frozen in place as this thing came barreling toward me. Just when I thought it would reach me, it veered off, disappearing into the trees. I stood there, heart pounding, gasping for breath. What the hell was that? Before I could even gather my thoughts, I heard the voice again. Only now, it was different, closer, and wrong. There was something off about it, something inhuman. "Help me," it croaked, the words distorted, like they were being forced through a throat that hadn't spoken in years. I turned, scanning the trees with my flashlight, but there was no one there. Nothing but darkness. Suddenly, the trees around me began to creak and groan, as if they were alive, twisting and bending in unnatural ways. My heart raced as I started backing away, desperate to find my way back to the path. But the forest was different now. It was like the woods had shifted, the trees forming a maze around me, trapping me inside. "Please," the voice came again, this time directly behind me. I spun around, the beam of my flashlight sweeping across the trees. My breath caught in my throat. There, standing no more than 10 feet away, was the creature. Its face was gaunt, skin stretched tight over its skull, and its eyes glowed with that same sickly yellow light. But what terrified me most was its mouth, its wide, gaping maw, filled with jagged, broken teeth, dripping with saliva. I stumbled back, my foot catching on a root, sending me sprawling to the ground. The creature let out another screech, louder this time, and started moving toward me. Scrambling to my feet, I turned and ran. I didn't care where I was going, I just needed to get away from that thing. The trees seemed to close in around me, branches clawing at my face and arms as I sprinted through the forest. The creature's footsteps were right behind me, its guttural breaths growing louder with every second. I don't know how long I ran, but eventually, I burst through the tree line and onto the old service road. Gasping for breath, I turned to look behind me, expecting to see the creature right on my heels. But it was gone. The woods were silent again, as if nothing had ever been there. My legs gave out beneath me, and I collapsed onto the ground, shaking. "What the hell?" I muttered to myself, trying to catch my breath. Before I could even process what had just happened, my radio crackled to life. "John?" It was the voice of my supervisor, Dave. "John, where the hell are you? We've been trying to reach you for over an hour." I fumbled for the radio, my hands still trembling. I'm here," I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. "Something's out here, Dave. Something, I don't know what it is, but it's not human." There was a pause on the other end. When Dave spoke again, his voice was grim. "Get back to the station. Now." I didn't need to be told twice. I staggered to my feet and started making my way back down the road, my mind racing with everything I had just seen. But as I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. That thing was still out there, watching, waiting. And I had the sinking feeling that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I made my way down the old service road, each step feeling heavier than the last, as if the weight of what I'd just experienced was physically pressing down on me. The darkness around me felt suffocating, thicker than before, and the wind had picked up, carrying with it a cold that chilled me to my bones. But it wasn't just the cold, there was something else, a presence. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. Watching. Waiting. I tried to keep my focus on the road ahead, but every few seconds, I found myself glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see that thing again. The image of its gaunt, skeletal frame and glowing eyes was seared into my mind, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still out there, following me, stalking me from the shadows. Just keep moving, I muttered to myself, trying to push down the rising panic. Get back to the station. You'll be safe there. But deep down, I wasn't sure if anywhere was safe anymore. The woods felt different now, alive in a way they hadn't before. The trees creaked and groaned like they were whispering to each other, their branches twisting unnaturally in the wind. I could swear I saw shapes moving between them, shadows darting just out of the corner of my eye. Every time I turned to look, they were gone, but the feeling of being watched only grew stronger. The radio on my belt crackled again, startling me. "John, are you there?" It was Dave's voice, but there was something off about it. It was faint, distorted, like it was coming from far away. "John, you need to hurry." "I'm coming," I replied, trying to keep the fear out of my voice. "I'm almost there." But as I spoke, a flicker of movement caught my attention. I stopped, my heart pounding in my chest, and shone my flashlight into the woods. The beam of light cut through the darkness, but there was nothing there. Just trees. For a moment, I thought I was imagining things, but then I saw it, something small and pale, crouching by the base of a tree. It was a child. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, her skin pale as snow, her hair long and matted with dirt. She was staring at me with wide, vacant eyes, her mouth moving as if she were whispering something, though no sound came out. "What the hell?" I breathed, my grip tightening on the flashlight. "Hey," I called out, stepping toward her cautiously. "Are you okay? What are you doing out here?" She didn't answer. She just stared at me, her mouth moving in that silent whisper. Something about her was all wrong. Her clothes were old, tattered, like they belonged to a different time. And her eyes, there was something in them. Something that made my skin crawl. I took another step closer, and as I did, the wind picked up, howling through the trees. The girl's lips stopped moving, and for a moment, the forest was deathly silent. Then she screamed. It was a high-pitched, blood-curdling scream that pierced through the night like a blade. I stumbled back, nearly dropping my flashlight as the sound echoed through the woods. The girl's face twisted into a grotesque, unnatural expression, her eyes rolling back in her head as the scream continued, growing louder, more distorted, until it didn't even sound human anymore. I turned and ran, my heart hammering in my chest, the sound of her scream chasing me down the road. My legs burned, my lungs felt like they were on fire, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. That thing, whatever it was, wasn't a child. It wasn't human. And I knew, somehow, that if I stopped, if I looked back, it would be the end of me. The scream finally died down, fading into the distance, but I didn't slow my pace. I could see the lights at the station up ahead, glowing dimly through the trees, and I pushed myself harder, desperate to reach safety. When I finally burst through the door of the station, I slammed it shut behind me, collapsing against it as I struggled to catch my breath. The room was warm, brightly lit, and for a brief moment, I allowed myself to believe that I was safe. that whatever was out there couldn't get me in here. But then I noticed something strange. The room was empty. "Dave?" I called out, my voice shaky. "Are you here?" No answer. I pushed myself to my feet, my heart still racing, and moved further into the station. The lights were on, the radio was still crackling softly on the desk, but there was no sign of Dave. His coat was hanging on the rack by the door, his coffee cup still sitting on the table, half empty, but he was gone. "Dave?" I called again, louder this time. "Where the hell are you?" Still nothing. I reached for the radio, but before I could grab it, the lights flickered. Just for a second, but long enough to send a jolt of fear through me. I turned toward the door, half expecting to see that pale, gaunt creature standing outside the window, but the darkness outside was impenetrable. The radio crackled again, and this time, Dave's voice came through. But it wasn't right. It was distorted, garbled, like it was being played through a broken speaker. "John, get out." The radio went dead. Panic surged through me, and I grabbed the radio, frantically trying to reach him. "Dave. Dave, where are you? What's going on?" No response. Just silence. I was about to try again when I heard something, a faint scraping sound, like nails dragging across wood. It was coming from the door. Slowly, I turned, my stomach knotting with dread. There, on the other side of the glass, was the creature. It was taller than before, its body twisted and contorted in unnatural ways, its skin pale and stretched tight over its bones. Its glowing yellow eyes were fixed on me, and its mouth was open, revealing rows of jagged, broken teeth. It pressed one skeletal hand against the glass, dragging its claws down the surface with that horrible scraping sound. I froze, my mind racing. The door was locked, but I knew, deep down, that it wouldn't matter. That thing wasn't bound by normal rules. It wasn't something I could fight or outrun. Then, without warning, the creature let out that same guttural screech and slammed its body against the door. The glass shook, cracked spider webbing across the surface. I backed away, my heart pounding in my ears, and grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a fire extinguisher. "Stay back!" I shouted, though I knew it was useless. The creature slammed against the door again, harder this time, and the cracks in the glass deepened. I raised the fire extinguisher, ready to defend myself, but before the creature could break through, there was a loud bang, like a gunshot, and the thing staggered back, its glowing eyes flickering. I turned, and there, standing in the doorway to the back room, was Dave, holding a shotgun. "Get down," he shouted, and I dropped to the floor as he fired again. The creature let out a horrible wail and disappeared into the darkness outside, leaving nothing but the cracked glass and the echo of its screech. Dave lowered the shotgun, breathing heavily, and helped me to my feet. "Come on," he said, his voice grim. "We need to get out of here. Now." I didn't argue. Together, we grabbed whatever supplies we could and bolted out the back door, leaving the station behind. As we ran through the woods, the howling wind and creaking trees seemed to follow us, but the creature didn't reappear. We made it to the truck, and Dave floored the gas pedal, speeding down the service road as fast as the truck could go. Neither of us spoke for a long time, the only sound the roar of the engine and the pounding of my heart. Finally, after what felt like hours, Dave broke the silence. "You saw it, didn't you?" I nodded, still shaken. "What was that thing?" Dave's hands tightened on the steering wheel, his knuckles white. It's been here a long time. Longer than we've been watching these woods. It's a Wendigo. I stared at him, the weight of his words sinking in. I had heard the stories, the legends, but I had never believed them. Not until now. Is it gone? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Dave shook his head. No. It'll be back. It always comes back. As we drove further away from the forest, I couldn't help but glance out the window, half expecting to see those glowing eyes staring back at me from the darkness. And deep down, I knew that this wasn't over. The Wendigo was still out there, waiting, watching. And one day, it would return.